The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back, and I'm happy we are. This is, in case you're wondering, with George. He's here, and we've got
Chad
four
here.
other people. Chad Rubin's back in the house. Sound off, gentlemen.
Well, I'm here. This is George, and I'm glad to hear Chad and I guess Ronnie and David.
I'm here, David. I'm here.
Ronnie's here.
Beautiful.
David and
Beautiful.
Al Clark is here also.
And Al Clark is back again.
Long-awaited guest. It's almost like the prodigal son coming to these airwaves. You're back. You've been on with Ronnie and Peter Trunk on another show on this network, the Dodger Show. You've been on this show, and poof, you haven't.
That was a tryout. That was.
That's right. It was. We were just warming up. That's all.
Right. Yeah.
All right. And
think of it as a delayed doubleheader.
Let me take all the credit for the technical skills that I never developed. So.
It's a millennial thing.
It's a millennial thing. How are you, Al? How are you?
I'm doing good, guys. How are you all?
Okay.
Yeah.
Glad you're back.
Al, you and I talked. I want the bulk of this to be on the relationship that you had with George in Trenton, New Jersey, George's dad, and your dad. There was like a closeness there that I can't describe. You guys are going to have to talk about it, and we'll start the show with that. And boy, it's going to be a great one. If you would, gentlemen.
Okay.
George.
Yeah. I'm glad we're able to talk again. Last week we were talking a little bit about the relationship of your dad and my dad and you and I in Trenton, New Jersey and all. And so that's where all this really started. And I had mentioned that, Trenton was always a wonderful baseball town. And the fact is that your dad had been a sports writer who actually covered a lot of the times when my dad was playing and wrote some very nice articles. And, then your background in baseball in Trenton and my father and myself. Al Downing was from Trenton. Bo Belinsky was from Trenton. And in, I think it was 48, the Trenton American Legion won the national championship, 56, and I think 60, the Trenton Babe Ruth League All-Stars won the national championship. And then in 55, Marshville across the river in Trenton, across the river from Trenton, won the Little League World Series. So that whole area, and I think it was in 72, I think you're from Ewing. In 72, I believe Ewing won the Babe Ruth League World Championship as well, and Babe Ruth League was founded in Trenton in 1951. So, baseball in the Trenton area go back a long way, and Al, I'm really pleased that you and I are able to talk about it.
Yes, indeed, George. And all those stats you got are absolutely correct, along with fellas like Steve Braun from Hopewell Township, which is right around the corner from Trenton,
right?
And Dave Gallagher from Trenton, and the Patero kid, Sonny Patero, of course, played in the Dodger organization and coached at Rider College, and his son played in the big leagues for a little while. Trenton is a tremendous history and hotbed of baseball, and it's great to be from there and to be a part of that history. Where your dad is concerned, and my dad and your dad were better friends than, of course, me and your dad, or even you and me, for that matter,
right,
at this time. But I was so fortunate. My dad went one day to your dad's house in Morrisville and wrote a story about your dad, and I was fortunate enough to have my picture taken with him. And your dad created such tremendous respect in organized baseball, professional baseball, as not only a player, a hard-nosed player, but also as an instructor. He was a manager on the minor league level or at the minor league level, most notably in Hawaii, for the Hawaiian Islanders, and then later on in the Yankee organization in Oneonta in the lower minor leagues, where his forte was really realized as a teacher and instructor. And a whole lot of his guys, of course, went on to the big leagues and that kind of thing. Where you're concerned, and you as a historian, boy, it doesn't get any better in our game than people that remember, like you, what went on before, like Ron with the Dodgers and Jackie Robinson. That is such a strong history and important for our game and for the young people, the millennials, coming up to have a history.
You know, Al, I appreciate all those comments, and you know, I was a little bit, really fortunate because I just grew up in baseball. I mean, from my earliest memory is just, hearing my dad and talking about baseball and meeting so many people and what you're saying, and you mentioned some people who I know quite well. I knew that Stevie Braun, I've met and had conversations with Steve many times, and Sonny Pataro, who I know very well. Sonny's son, Chris, I met a few years ago, and Chris played in the, Detroit organization as well. So, baseball for me, and just as for you with your knowledge and your background, has been, really important. And I'm just, thrilled to be part of it. And my knowledge of history of baseball really comes from the fact that I was surrounded by it from a very early age. So all the memorabilia, the people I met, the experiences I had, at Griffith Stadium, growing up there, and that kind of thing has just been priceless for me, and I'm really happy to be able to share it with people.
Well,
that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool, George. And where I'm concerned, having worked in the old, you mentioned Griffith Stadium. Well, I worked in Tiger Stadium and the old Cleveland Municipal Stadium. As a matter of fact, I was one of the umpires that closed Cleveland Municipal Stadium and then opened the Jake, as it was called at the time. Right. And the history of those old ballparks, Comiskey Park in Chicago, they smelled baseball. The aroma and the atmosphere was just wonderful. It's what you and I and all of us grew up with. And those experiences, those remembering experiences are valuable, and we have them with us today. All through our lives. Cool.
Al, I'd like to just comment on that because you're absolutely correct. My opinion, and I've mentioned it many times, baseball has become so corporate, but the old ballparks had such a feel and had such a wonderful, history, and you only have two left right now, and that's Wrigley and Fenway. And even Yankee Stadium, the house that Ruth built, I mean, my gosh, it was demolished. There's nothing left.
No,
and so
the parking lot.
Right. And so for me, I love to talk about. I love to talk about the way it used to be because I think so many of the younger generation, they have no idea. They think about the stadiums today, and some are wonderful stadiums, but they are corporate. They're not baseball fields. Stadiums where people used to go to a ball game to watch the game, and the game was the entertainment. Now they go to a stadium, and as David and I have talked, you have all these kind of corporate crazy stuff that goes on, and that's what people are watching. They want to know who won the race between the mascots or who's on Kiss Camera or all this other kind of stuff, not what's happening on the field, which to me is where the game, and now, as you know, being part of it, being an umpire, that's where the game is played, and that's what's important.
Well, when you get between the lines and away from the stands and the corporate boxes and that kind of thing, baseball hasn't changed a whole lot. It's still 3 strikes and you're out. 4 balls and you go to first base, and there's hits and there's errors and there's strategy involved that's been involved for a long time. They talk about the shift and on the field and that kind of thing. Well, the shift has been around for an awful long time. A fellow by the name of Gene Mauch employed that when he was managing in Minnesota back in the early 80s, early 70s, middle 70s. And now all of a sudden it comes along and everybody says that this is a brand new thing. Well, it's not brand new, and seldom is anything brand new except the corporate stuff. George, when we were all growing up, could we have afforded to go to the ballpark and sit at a box seat for $1,200, $1,400, $1,500 a ticket per game?
Right. Hey.
You know, I mean, this is a corporate world on steroids.
Yeah, well,
Absolutely.
I have stubs from Yankee Stadium at $3.50.
Right.
You know, and even at that time, the old Yankee Stadium was considered the elite. I mean, you could go to the Polo Grounds, you could go to Ebbets Field, and you were among the working class. When you went to Yankee Stadium, and this wasn't really true, but the aura was there, and there was a feeling that going to Yankee Stadium was a level above the working class ability to see a ball game. You took your
The aristocrats.
friends. Yeah, you took your friends. You took your business associates, you know, things like that. But it really wasn't so. But I agree with you both, and George and I have talked about it. I mean, I finally went to the new Yankee Stadium, and I sort of grew up in the old Yankee Stadium, having grown up in the Bronx, not far from the stadium. And it's true. I mean, it's like going to this sort of circular shopping center with fancy restaurants and shops, you know, and then suddenly you come out and there's a ball field in the middle of this. It's not the same thing, and certainly the smells and the sound are so different. Plus, the sound, there's so much noise in all of the new ballparks. Instead of the wonderful, quiet, tranquil inning rolling into next inning, it doesn't happen anymore.
I can identify the exact moment when the transition took place. The first computer geek that typed in "make noise" on the screen.
Yeah, clap.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Cheer now.
Well, no, wait a minute. That may have been another Trenton guy.
That was the moment. I don't know who it was, what stadium.
Well, I can tell you exactly when and where it was. It was a fellow by the name of Tony Siegel, who operated the scoreboard at the Houston Astrodome. And he is from Trenton, and he was the computer guy. He was an old Navy guy, brought on as a public relations guy in Houston. When it was learned that he had a computer, somewhat of a computer background, he programmed the Houston Astrodome scoreboard. And if you remember that huge thing, and back in the day, my goodness, that was an unbelievable situation, the Houston Astrodome. And he was the first guy that put up there clap and cheer and make noise and that kind of thing. So if we're going to place blame instead of gratitude, we can go back to another Trenton guy, and that'd be Tony Siegel, who's now.
Hey, Al, you know what? I did not know that. I know Tony, and I did not know that. And the next time I communicate with him, I'm going to mention that.
Well, he's a great old baseball guy and a wonderful person.
He is. As a matter of fact, he told me.
Show, George.
Yeah, he told me. Yeah, he's out in San Francisco. I think he's out your way, Ralph.
Personally, and I need to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think he's out your way. I think he's with the San Francisco Giants, but
yes,
Tony,
he is.
Tony has told me that.
Him then. I will find him and bring him on. That's my
okay. There you go.
Oh, that's a great story.
It is a great story, Al. I'm glad you mentioned that because I had never heard that before. And
the only
Ralph,
the only black
if you can get him on, if you can get him on, certainly mention Al's name and my name, and Tony will know both of us, and we'll talk about Trenton. Right.
Tell him to come on and defend himself.
Yeah, right.
What he's done.
Right.
Oh, I don't think he's got to defend himself. That was brand new at the time, if you remember. My goodness, it was the eighth wonder of the world, Judge Hofheinz, and
that's right.
That kind of thing. It was wonderful.
And from a business standpoint, I mean, you can't help but say, business-wise, baseball's $1 billion industry. And you have to credit them keeping up with the times from that standpoint. But along the way, you've lost the kids. And with that in mind, I just want to say, recognize the Baltimore Oriole organization. I read an article this week, and I put it up on the Comfortably Zoned Facebook page, that the Baltimore Orioles are offering some sort of a kids get in free ticket deal that is more than just lip service. And I think that is what baseball needs to do. They need to cultivate the future, and they're not doing a corporate thing. So I want to give them credit. Teams so rarely do things progressively in baseball.
Well, that's a great segue, Ralph, into something else that I wanted to talk about a little bit today. And we talk about the problems that we have, in our game. But this week also something happened that was really good, and baseball used some foresight. And that was the Houston Astros signing Jose Altuve to a multi-year deal, regardless of the numbers of money, the numbers involved and the money that he's going to earn. He's the kind of guy that we want to emulate. He's a little guy. He puts the bat on the ball. He hustles every day. His work ethic is above reproach. And if we're going to get the young guys involved, young people involved in our game, those are the people that we need to put at the forefront of our game. And I think Houston did a great thing by, if you will, locking him up for the next 6 or 7 years and creating that kind of atmosphere for not only the Houston Astros, but also for baseball.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I was very happy to see that. There have been a few small ball players out there, like I'm thinking back to Rizzuto, but there've been a number of them. But this guy, I mean, he's a terror every time he comes up to bat. I mean, he's going to get hits. Yeah,
a real hustler. He's great.
An overachiever with talent.
Mm-hmm.
And seemingly a really nice guy. I mean, sometimes, you have to worry about their personality, but I don't think there's a problem there at all.
Not even a little bit?
I don't know.
Well, those are the things, going back to our subject there, those are the things that I think baseball has to do to attract our young people, to sustain, the viability of our sport, and our sport being the best sport ever, and going forward.
Hey, one more.
I agree. I agree with that, and David and Ralph and Ronnie and Chad and all. It's a different world. As I've mentioned before, I mean, the problem I have with baseball and what you're talking about with, signing players, smaller players, and doing all that kind of thing is wonderful. But kids have stopped playing the game, and that bothers me greatly when I look at the fields that are empty, and the only time they're being used is when a coach or when a parent or whatever, there's a scheduled practice or a game, and they're out there with their uniforms. The rest of the time, they're not playing. The kids are not playing baseball. They're not learning the game. They're not learning the fun because it's become so organized, and everything in our world today is so organized because I guess we have to. But just to get on a bicycle, put your glove on the handlebars and ride to a ball field and throw down jackets for bases and use taped up baseballs.
Visualization.
Well, the part of the problem is it's the distances. The kids that live in the suburbs, if you grew up like in New York as I did, you could field a team or maybe even two from one apartment building. You can't do that now. You got to get in your parents' car, and you have to be driven over to the field, and it's not the spontaneous creation of a game that it used to be.
Right.
And and the other problem is, of course, that the kids, unless it's a Saturday or Sunday, can't see a game because it's all at night when they're going to school and going to sleep.
And everybody else is using their thumbs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, they are. That's the other thing that I mentioned is that the fact that you got the kids are playing their video games, or you go into a ball game and you take your son or daughter or whatever, and most of the time they're communicating with their friends on their phone. And,
taking pictures.
Right, taking pictures, selfies, and doing all this kind of stuff. And yet the ball fields, and I've said this so many times, the ball fields are empty, and where you learn and where you love to play baseball is playing the game, having fun, doing pickup games. That's what we used to do that are never done anymore.
In the neighborhood, and you could see kids playing baseball.
Sure.
All the time.
You don't see it anymore. Right.
Yeah. My cousin.
And there are a lot of baseball fields out there, guys. As I used to fly around the country, one of my little hobbies was, as we were coming into a city, in an airplane, I used to look for two things on the ground. Baseball fields, and they are plentiful, and golf courses. Of course, because I'm interested in golf. But there are many, many, baseball fields around that are not being utilized. Right. And that's a shame.
Exactly.
Now, the flip side of that is here in Williamsburg, Virginia, where I am, I've just recently been asked to be the opening day speaker at the Williamsburg Youth Little League, Cal Ripken Junior Little League. And I'm going to talk to them about, as they're all lined up as we used to do on the foul lines going both down the first base and third base line. Mm-hmm. I'm going to talk to them about being optimistic and learning the game and relying on each other and your teammates and listening to your coaches and parents and creating that kind of atmosphere, that positive atmosphere that they perhaps can take into the league and have fun doing it. And that's what we used to do.
Yeah.
I think that's great. Yeah, I think that's absolutely great.
The Washington Nationals have a wonderful
league in Alameda where the kids do anything they've done well pleased.
And Washington Nationals have a program going, and I know firsthand because the park right across the street from my house has had a Little League field. My son played on it when they were in Little League age, and just the last year they went in there and they renovated this field. It's part of their youth, program to encourage kids to play baseball. It's dedicated to Pudge Rodriguez. He was there for the opening dedication. They made a beautiful field and put in new lights, a new electric scoreboard, covered the stands so that the parents don't sit in the hot sun. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful ballpark for little kids to play in. And apparently they're doing that all over the D.C. area, paid for by the Washington Nationals.
Yeah,
that's great news.
Henderson did something quite the same thing in Oakland. Al, in dress rehearsal for this show, you told one of the most wonderful stories that taught me and George, as a matter of fact, what umpiring is about. 4 eyes on the ball. Can you recreate that story for us, if you will?
Sure, I can. When we got to the big leagues and we had 4 guys on the field, and before this season began, or at our opening day meeting, one particular crew chief that I had, Rick Reed, who was just a tremendous, tremendous umpire for a lot of years, in our pregame meeting, he told us, and one of the reasons that we are as good as we are out on the field, he said to our crew, he said, we've got 8 eyes out there. There's 4 of us with 8 eyes. He said, I don't care which 4 eyes, but I want 4 eyes on the ball all at one time. And now that creates a situation where if something happens out on the field, and an umpire, one guy goes to the other 3 guys and says, did you see what I saw? Or what happened? I didn't see it. All 3 guys cannot say, I didn't see it, and were perplexed for an answer. And this created an atmosphere on the field that we were aware of what was happening when we weren't directly involved in a play. We had to be knowledgeable. We had to be up on our game. We had to hustle to see what was going on. And that created an atmosphere of us. It helped create an atmosphere of us being as good as we were.
Yeah, that's the story. That's the story. And great. I told Ralph, and I mentioned it, and Al, as long as I've been around baseball all my life, that's the first I'd ever heard of that, and it's a terrific, terrific story because it gives credence to the fact of umpires maintaining the integrity of the game by looking and watching what goes on. And you cannot go to somebody and say, hey, what did you see? And he says, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Well, now you're talking about you got 4 eyes on the field, so somebody's going to see it and able to corroborate what went on.
That's exactly right. Well, that's why, there's so many things that are seen from an ump's eye view that fans and even players, coaches, and managers don't see that we're charged with, and that's why our game runs as smoothly as it does most of the time, because the umpires are as good as they are. But there's no bias in that statement at all.
All I know, Al, I've told you this before, I've told other people, when we were playing, until the umpire showed up, we would not play. We just didn't have a game. And so the umpires, were very much a part of baseball, always have been and always will be.
Well, I told Ralph a story during the week, guys, and it's very, very true. Unfortunately, it's kind of true. You just said that nobody can play until the umpires are. Well, umpires get to a ballpark about an hour and a half before the ball game just to be in the atmosphere and to start thinking about walking out on the field to umpire and officiate a Major League Baseball game. The only time that the players, coaches, managers, or executives think about the umpires, literally think about the umpires at all, is if it's 5 minutes before the game and we don't walk out onto the field, somebody says, "Hey, where the hell are the umpires?"
Where are the umpires?
And that's the only time that you were thought of in an upfront manner.
But as a kid growing up, the umpire is so important because of a Norman Rockwell painting that appeared, I think it was, I can't even think of the magazine.
Saturday
Rain delay.
Rain delay,
yeah.
Right.
And I even know who those umpires were.
McGrath, I think, was one of them.
Beans Reardon, McGrath, and I just had it. I'll think of it in a second.
Okay, my point being that the umpire's decision, you're going to play the game, you're not going to play the game, that's like having everything on your shoulders, and it really signified what it's all about. You can't start it unless and who made that famous call? What was that, a ball or a strike? It's nothing until I call it.
That's right. That's right. But it's accentuated in today's game even more so when ticket prices are as high as they are, and drainage systems in ballparks and modern ballparks are as good as they are, and if you have a 35 or 40,000 people, people in the ballpark, and now it's raining in the fourth inning, third or fourth inning, and now there's radar, and if there's 40,000 people, that equates into a $5 million gate, if not more, and that's a lot of money. And the responsibility of the umpire to call that ball game off, give rain checks, there's a whole lot of responsibility there.
Absolutely. And
now, Al, let me ask you something. How does that happen? When does the crew chief make that call, or how does that happen when you have a rain delay and you decide to hold up the game and wait for the weather to clear or whatever? But whose decision is that to continue?
Once the lineup cards are exchanged at home plate, it is solely the responsibility of the umpires. The crew chief will ultimately make the final decision. However, it is a conglomerate of opinion by the umpires, and the umpires work in conjunction with the grounds crew, and there's radar in every single ballpark now as to when the rain is coming, how long it's going to last, where it's going afterwards. And don't forget, the integrity of the 162-game schedule is on the line. We don't want to play 161 games. We want to play 162. And in order to get a winner, all those games have to be played. And to the conclusion, hopefully 9 innings in every game.
Right.
Without double headers. Without doubling up.
Double header, the old-fashioned Sunday double header is a thing of the past primarily. Now we have split double headers.
Right. Day night.
Day night double headers, two separate admissions, right.
Yep.
I have a
Do
good
you
friend.
ever have
A good
to work?
friend who.
Does an umpire ever have to work both day and night games?
All the time. All the
okay.
time.
They don't bring another crew in for the.
No,
night.
no.
Okay.
Actually, that's
Is there
probably
anything
better
you
than
like?
doing than having the games back to back. I would think for the umpires because they get about 30 minutes rest between games in the old doubleheaders format, and they're out there standing on for 9 innings and then a 30-minute break and then come back for another 9 innings. That's pretty tough. That was pretty tough to do, I think.
Well, do it in Kansas City and St. Louis where it's 104, outside and 130
Yeah.
on the field.
Yeah, that's right.
And no breaks.
Extenuating circumstances, I believe we call that.
What would you do to cool off?
Al Clark.
What would you
Chad
do to
Rubin.
cool off?
During the game?
Yeah.
During the game, in every dugout, in the hot weather, there is what they call an ice bucket. That's about a 3-foot square container that they fill up with ice, and you literally, the players, the umpires, can go in and stand in there for a couple of minutes, and that cools down the bottom of your feet, and it cools down up to your ankles and your thighs, and to your calves. And that kind of regenerates you a little bit, and it really does help.
Does it?
Hydration, was that always thought of as a big thing, or is that kind of new?
No, hydration is fine. I mean, everybody was aware of the health situation, and we get water whenever we want to. We hydrate all the time, and if we're know we're going to be out on the field for a long time on a hot day, it's too late to hydrate that morning, so we hydrate the night before. And it's not only the ice that perhaps goes in the drinks, but actual water, and those are things that help sustain us.
That was one time, though. You got to tell everybody.
Yeah. I don't imbibe in alcohol at all anymore. But those are things that we do to help ourselves, and once again, help ourselves be as good as we can be while walking out onto the field.
Beautiful.
Now, do you stay in a separate hotel than the road?
We do. There's no reason in the world for me to get up in the morning and go to a hotel coffee shop and see someone down there, a player that I perhaps, had to discipline last night, or even if it wasn't me, if a tough situation came about, I don't need to be seeing him in the morning, nor does he need to be seeing me. So, familiarity breeds contempt. That's why umpires travel every 3 days.
Is that by design or by league rules that they separate the hotels, or is it just something that the umpires decided on their own that it's better to be?
No, I think the umpires decided on that on their own a long time before me.
Now, Al, let me ask you something about that. The ball clubs, have a traveling secretary that makes the arrangements for the team and that kind of thing. Who makes the hotel arrangements for umpires? Is that Major League Baseball?
No, the umpires do it themselves, and our obligation is to be at the ballpark. So, and some guys like to get up early and fly on first flight out in the morning. Other guys like to fly at noon. And there's no rule that says we have to fly together, and there's no rule that says we have to stay together. The rule says that we've got to be at the ballpark an hour and a half before the ball game.
Right.
So, we do what we want to do. We're adults. And some guys, just like an office building, some guys really, really get along. Some guys like each other, and sometimes there are personality conflicts. And that doesn't detract you from doing your job. It's just, I don't need to socialize with them, nor do they socialize with me.
Now, do you guys, as umpires, are you provided with all your equipment, or do you have to buy it? I mean, how does that happen? I mean, I know with ball clubs, obviously you're given uniforms and all the kind of crazy, special uniforms they have, but how does it work with umpires?
Umpires are provided uniforms by the Major League Baseball, by the Commissioner's Office. They also give us a travel case, and our equipment is moved from stadium to stadium, city to city, via an air freight company. And the equipment that we use, shin guards, chest protectors, masks, that kind of thing, that is our own responsibility. Because once again, there are a myriad of styles and companies and things like that out there, and it becomes a personal preference. So guys will work deals with a particular company or buy from a different company, a particular company.
Were there times when
out.
the gear didn't show up and you had to? Can you tell us about making?
Oh, sure. We'll don ourselves in groundskeeper uniforms or generic hats and that kind of thing. I remember one time where we couldn't find any hats, and we were in Cleveland, the old ballpark in Cleveland. And of course, it really didn't make any difference because there were only 2,500 or 3,000 people in the stands. But we all wore Cleveland Indian hats. It looked kind of funny out there.
Yeah, I think I saw a photograph one time of umpires where the luggage or the uniforms or your equipment had been lost. And I think it was in Oakland or Kansas City or someplace, and the umpires all were donned, had to wear the uniform of the ball club.
Yeah, well, we'll put on, shells or something like that to not to emphasize how much we enjoy the Kansas City Royals, but just so we're all alike out there.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you another thing, Al. Let me ask you another thing about them. I'm really curious. How is the selection made for All-Star games and World Series, where you have 4 and then you have 2 more umpires for those games? Now, where does that selection come? Who makes the call on what umpires are used for those games?
Great question, and the media, gets this wrong all the time. Back in the day, when there was only the All-Star game and the World Series,
right,
it was done on a seniority type basis usually. Then we evolved into more playoff games, and Major League Baseball came up with the idea, and it's a good idea, that there would be 2 senior guys, 2 middle guys, and 2 young guys in most every series. And then the expansion again, well, sure it is. And then the expansion occurred again where, there's more playoff games and a wild card games and deeper into the playoffs. Playoffs went from 3 games to 5 games and 5 games to 7 games, or the best of anyway. And now it became, more of a let's get everybody involved. So when these big games or when these special games or important games occur, that everybody is comfortable going into it and being assigned to it. So, yes, it certainly has to do with merit and how you're graded and that kind of thing. But it also has to do with, because there's so many playoff games and special events, as we call them, as we refer to them, there's so many special event games that everybody gets involved. And it's the commissioner's office and the umpire department in the commissioner's office, their scouts, their supervisors, to put together crews that will complement each other out on the field. And that's how they're worked. It's not a rotation anymore. It's not a strictly merit basis. It's getting everybody involved so everybody feels comfortable in those circumstantial games.
No, that's really interesting. Now, I appreciate that because I didn't know. And,
Al, I have another question. Who decides who starts let's say you're in a 3-game series. Who decides who's going to be at the home plate and who's going to be at first and second and third?
Great question. Great question. Yeah. And during the regular season, the season has begun on opening day with the home plate umpire being the most senior guy, the crew chief, usually. The next senior guy at first base, the next senior at second base, and the least senior at third base. Okay. On a daily basis, we rotate clockwise. If I worked home plate today, I'll work third base tomorrow, and everyone will follow me. When we move cities, if I went from New York to Baltimore, if I worked third base in Baltimore, in New York on Sunday, Monday's game in Baltimore, I would move to second base. And we just kept that rotation up all year long. There are parameters for if someone gets hurt and someone joins our crew, that new umpire will go to second base and pick up the rotation there. Also, if an umpire gets hurt, and let's say the home plate umpire has to be taken out of the ballgame, usually the second base umpire will come in if the injury occurs before the fifth inning, and then that will count as his home plate game, and the crew will rotate. If it happens after the fifth inning, perhaps the second base umpire will come in, but then he'll go to first base the next day. Because it's obviously a much shorter time. So all these things that occur out on the field, fans and broadcasters and talking heads have no idea about, that are just as natural can be for us.
Right.
Did the union put that in? Was that something that all those provisions for what happens?
Union had nothing to do with it. Nothing at all. Those provisions were acted and agreed upon, oh my goodness, long time before I got to the big leagues, and it works, and if it's not broke, don't fix it. And it works very, very well for umpires.
Now, I wanted to ask you one other thing, and you might not even know this because it was going back way before your time, but when my dad was playing, often they only had 3 umpires. And, now you have 4. Now, I was wondering if that was a league rule or if something happened where 3 umpires were deemed not sufficient to really cover the bases. But I have a lot of old box scores where I know there's only 3 umpires in those box scores.
Well, yeah, there's no doubt about it, George. That came about in the late 50s, early 60s, when 4 umpires were employed out on the field. And I think it became more prevalent as the actual play got better. And it turned out that guys couldn't cover a baseball field with a 3-man crew.
Right.
They went to a 4-man crew. Right. And there are different parameters. Of course, in the AAA, A and AA, there's 1 and 2-man crews. There's 2 and 3-man crews. When you get to AAA, there's always a 3-man crew, sometimes a 4-man crew, and of course, when you get to the big leagues, there's always a 4-man crew,
right.
If not more during the special events. And there's a definite rotation for each and every system employed by the umpires in whatever system they're using, whether it be a 2-man, 3-man, or 4-man crew, or even 6-man crew.
Right. Now, when you started out, you were in the minor league. So what did you have? Did you have a 3-man crew when you started?
Well, I started in the Texas League in 1972, and we had a 2-man crew.
2-man.
Went to I was in the Midwest League. I went to the Texas League AA, had a 2-man crew. We worked a 3-man crew in the playoffs. Bobby Bragan was the president of the Texas League at the time. Then I went to the American Association, where we had a 3-man crew always, and in the playoffs we had a 4-man crew. And then in Venezuela, we had a 4-man crew all the time. And of course, in the big leagues, we indoctrinated into a 4-man crew.
Hey,
now, when you were umpiring in like Venezuela, was there a language problem because you're dealing with so many Latins, or how did that all work? I mean, obviously, if you're here in this country, a little bit different. But if you're in a foreign country, you have different customs, different languages, and that kind of thing. Or was the language of baseball sufficient? In other words, if you're having a pregame meeting with the managers or whatever, did you need a translator, or were you able to talk in terms of baseball to make them understand what you expected and what the game was all about?
I think everybody in baseball understands Spanglish.
Okay.
And
right.
the language of baseball is pretty worldwide, as certainly through the Caribbean countries. And no, we did not. I learned Spanish pretty quickly. And the players that have been around a while, they know English, working English pretty good. The example that I can give there, you all remember when Sammy Sosa appeared before Congress and he kept on saying, no comprendo, no comprendo. Sammy, I've known Sammy Sosa for decades. He speaks English as well as you and I do. So, it's kind of a convenience thing at times also.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great story, right.
It's like having a selective memory.
Yes,
right.
exactly.
That's right. That's right.
All right.
I have to mention one thing, Al, about your book. It's so fabulous. Called Out But Safe. It's a terrific book. I've read it a couple of times, and I've enjoyed every bit of it. I had difficulty putting it down. Yep. And for those of you that have not seen the book or bought the book or read the book, I behoove you to do it. It's a great book. Just great.
Tell people where it can be found. I know it just came out in paperback.
Well, it's coming out in paperback on April 1st. It's published by the University of Nebraska Press. It certainly is on Amazon, and it will be in Barnes & Noble as a hardback copy has been for the last 3 years. I'm very humbled by the success that it's enjoyed. I was very fortunate to have been eyewitness to a lot of iconic things in the 26 years I spent in the big leagues. Things like, for instance, I was on the field in Fenway Park when Bucky Dent hit the iconic home run against the Red Sox in the one-game playoff in 1978. I was the home plate umpire when Randy Johnson pitched his first no-hitter in Seattle, and when Nolan Ryan earned his 300th win at the great old ballpark, County Stadium in Milwaukee. Of course, I was on the field during the earthquake in 1989 in San Francisco, and on the field when Cal Ripken broke Lou Gehrig's record. And all these things that I saw and I was eyewitness to, I decided to sit down and write about them from an ump's eye view. And that's what I did, along with a lot of other things. You know, I've had a wonderful, wonderful life, and in a wonderful life, you know, you have some ups and you have some downs. And I wrote about all of them. And quite candidly...
you told me you've got another book in you.
Yes, I do. I was sitting with Ferguson Jenkins at an event last year, and I've known Fergie for years and years, and I asked him what he was doing. He said that he and a couple of other Hall of Famers are putting together a book simply what 150 or 200 questions that baseball fans ask baseball Hall of Famers. And I started thinking about that a little bit, and I thought, geez, I get asked questions all the time. So I'm sitting down and I'm writing a book about 100 questions that Major League Baseball fans ask Major League umpires all the time. I've given it to a
George Case questions. You could put 6 George Case.
Oh my goodness! Every day, every day. I mean, think of the questions that we went over here today. You know, how do you get to the big leagues, and how do you rotate? And my goodness gracious! And these are all questions if you're a baseball fan that you perhaps don't think about very often until you talk to an umpire. But it certainly enhances your pleasure of viewing our game.
Right. Did you take notes? Did you take notes about what was going on that you could use in the book? Did you have notes, or did you just recreate all of the memories?
No, in some circumstances I certainly took notes, and in other circumstances, you know, just great fond memories. Like I'll give you an example. In 1978, Bill White, the Yankee announcer and later the National League president, and I were very good friends. He lived up the Delaware River in Pennsylvania, and I lived kind of south of it, and we got together very, very often. Well, at the time, he was an announcer with the Yankees, and the ball game was at 1:48 in the afternoon, and we both got to the ballpark about 10 o'clock in the morning. No one was at Fenway Park. Bill and I sat down behind the Red Sox dugout in the stands. The grounds crew wasn't even on the field. And we were just taking in this glorious fall morning at Fenway Park in Boston, knowing full right well that within 3 hours, this was going to be complete chaos. And the little conversation that we had about what was happening, how it was happening, what was going to happen, was just precious. And I decided to share some of those thoughts. And that's what I talk about in that chapter. As a matter of fact, the chapter is called Bucky F. Dent. Bucky received a new middle name in that day in Boston.
Buckner has that same name. I wonder if they're related.
They might be.
They might be. That's right. That's right. Let me ask you a question, Al. When a ball is scuffed, in the dirt at home plate, they throw them out. But what happens when a ball is bouncing, to the first baseman and it's scuffed? They don't throw that out. What's the difference?
Well, sure they do. You just don't see it because the pitch. Sure they do. Just because it bounces doesn't mean it gets scuffed. But back in the day when you had some of the pitchers, the Tommy Johns of the world, they knew what to do with a scuffed baseball. I'm not sure today's pitchers know exactly what to do with it. George, you might chime in on this and talking about hitting with your dad and pitching, what pitchers did with it, slippery elms and spitballs.
Yes, I know, Al. I know all those stories, right?
I know. They're precious. But in today's world, everybody wants everything pristine. And God forbid they should have to hit a baseball that's been scuffed or marked or something like that.
Yeah.
So we just change them out. If that's the order of the day, then so be it.
Huh.
Hey, can I bring Al, you and Ronnie together with a name that you mentioned, who is the president of the Texas League, Bobby Bregan. Bobby Bregan was one of those who originally signed a petition to keep Jackie Robinson out of the big league.
Oh, that's right.
From there, he met with Branch Rickey and learned a little about humanity. He was sent to the minors. He later became a coach and manager and transformed his life. Not many people, not many old crackers back then who were, quote, a person of their times or whatever. Not many of them. Pee Wee Reese was someone who adopted Red Barber, changed. Not many. Bobby Bregan, as a manager in the minors, I think it was might have been in Montreal, I don't remember, turned Maury Wills, a career minor leaguer, spent like 9 years in the minors, taught him, tutored him, mentored him, taught him to switch hit or to bunt, whatever it was, enabled him to reach the big leagues. And his whole life was transformed. Whenever that name is mentioned, I have to say that's a great story about
it. It is a great story. It sure is.
Well, Bobby in the Texas League was really good to us. But as you said, he had he turned his life around and everything. But his brother Jimmy Bregan, I mean, he was a much more gregarious person than Bobby was, and he would show up and tell stories of the ilk that you're talking about. Whereas Bobby used to be, kind of embarrassed about the things that he thought when he was a young man and player. Jimmy embraced the color line, breaking the color line a whole lot longer, or a whole lot before Bobby did. But fortunately, obviously, Bobby came around and became a great ambassador for baseball, and the breaking of the color line and that kind of thing. So yeah, those guys and those stories are precious to our heritage.
They are precious. Yeah.
And along those lines, did you ever meet Al? Did you ever meet Emmett Ashford?
No, did not. I certainly did not meet Emmett. He was long gone by the time I got to the big leagues. But I worked with a disciple of his, at least the mechanics on the field, and a fellow by the name of Ron Luciano.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But
before Emmett Ashford, there was a minor league umpire by the name of Steamboat Johnson, and he was a man of color, and God, they loved him in the minor leagues. A great reputation, a good umpire, with all the histrionics that Emmett employed and later Ronnie employed, that aren't necessarily, the things, the right things, or what we would consider the right things to do. But boy, it sure added color to the game in so many ways.
Al, before I forget, I've got to get 2 weeks' worth of stuff in here. You had a relationship, plus a great conversation that you and I had off the air. You had a relationship with Steve Palermo that goes way back. Rest his soul, he passed a few years ago. Can you talk about him?
Stevie and I did everything in baseball that two people can do together except work a Major League All-Star game together. We went to umpire school together in 1972. We worked in the minor leagues together. We worked in the big leagues on the same crew together. We worked a World Series together in 1983. We worked spring trainings together. Yeah, I knew Stevie very, very well. Stevie was the epitome of everything that was right about umpiring. He was like a gazelle on the field. People were attracted to him because of his quite gregarious personality. Players respected him because he worked hard every day like they did. And it was a shame what happened to him in Dallas. It happened at a restaurant. He was shot in the back. It happened at a restaurant that we all frequented, a place called Campisi's, in Dallas. And, it's just a shame. That was the last game he worked. Actually, I was not working with him at the time, but I followed, that happened, I don't remember, it was a Saturday, I guess, Saturday night. And on Monday, I went into Dallas and visited with him in the hospital and then a rehab unit. And, well, he was a friend of mine for a long, long time.
Yeah. He wanted so badly to come back. I remember stories periodically when he was in rehab, and he was not a quitter. And
no, by all means, he may have been a lot of things, but a quitter is not one of them. He was the epitome of a whole lot of things, a whole lot of good things in our game. Not only umpiring, but in the mechanics of baseball.
Which umpiring school, let's give them credit for producing both of you. Which school was that again?
Well, the school that produced us is no longer in existence. It was at the time called the Umpire Specialization Program, and it was subsidized by Major League Baseball. Its director was a fellow now by the late Barney Deary. As a matter of fact, the 1972 class was the most prolific class of any class ever. The first two guys to go to the big leagues in that class or from that class, and we only spent 4 years in the minor leagues, was Eddie Montague, National League umpire, longtime National League umpire from San Francisco, and myself. And after that, we had like 7 or 8 other guys go to the big leagues, some of it because of expansion and some of it because, guys, they just got there in a hurry and they were good umpires. But we had like 8 or 10 guys from that class come to the big leagues. And that just doesn't happen.
That's great.
Well,
That's great.
Well,
did you ever run into a
I don't know what
situation being Jewish?
Say that again?
Did you ever run into situations because you were Jewish?
Only twice, and that happened both times in the minor leagues. After a ball game, there were 2 players that attacked me. Me and a partner were walking out of the ballpark in Indianapolis, and we were attacked by 2 actually former major leaguers in a quite anti-Semitic tirade. They were suspended the next day. The manager of the Iowa Oaks at the time, a fellow by the name of Joe Sparks, couldn't be more apologetic about what happened. And another time by a big league umpire scout. But other than that, never ever. You know, that goes back to the old Stan Musial thing, where the only race in baseball was the race to first base. The only color was white for the home team and gray for the visitors, and the only creed was the rule book. And that's the way that we live our lives in baseball.
Great.
Al, I'm a Jew, and you shared the name of one of those players, and I wouldn't say his name without permission.
It was Denny McLain. It was Denny McLain. Denny McLain was on his way down and out, and he had gotten beat in a ballpark. he was playing for the Iowa Oaks at the time, and he had gotten beaten. He was beaten and didn't like the fact that he was beaten in the minor leagues. And we were walking out of into a parking lot. He and a fellow by the name of Ray Bussey, who had a cup of coffee in the big leagues, I believe, with the Cardinals at the time, and they just took it upon themselves to attack. And I was pretty shaken up by it. My partner at the time, Ted Hendry, who later went to the American League also, we called Joe Ryan, who was the president of the American Association. He would not stand for it. He woke everybody up in the middle of the night and suspended those guys on the spot.
Oh. Nice that they did that, and nice that you are so open with what's happened. And
why not? I mean, it happened.
You're a hell of a guest, Al Clark.
You are.
Thank you.
You are.
Yes.
You are.
Okay. I want to go around the room and start with Chad Rubin, and all of us ask you one more question so no one gets shortchanged, because we've got 5 guys talking to you.
Chad, how you doing?
Chad.
Is Chad there?
I think what he's saying is you were a terrific guest. I can hear him now. And why don't you come back more often, Al? That's what he said.
Well, I'd be glad to come back. Anytime that anything happens on the field or around our game, I'm certainly glad to talk about it. I'm glad to offer my opinions, and my opinions aren't always right, but as is evidenced by multiple marriages. But it is what it is.
Let me just thank Chad for that great question, and now to David Hubler.
Yeah, one quick question. Each umpire has his own way of calling a strike behind the plate there. I mean, are these sort of just created on the spot and become the signature of that particular umpire, or is that something you pick up back in umpire school?
David, that is a great, insightful question, and I've got to take a little bit of time to answer it. Back in the day, we developed our own personality in the minor leagues, and our personality was ascribed to on the field. And like I called strikes in one way, and Dutch Leonard called strikes another way, and Bill Haller's called strikes in another way. And we were kind of identified by that mechanism, those mechanics. Unfortunately, and I think fortunately, I think it added, looking back on it, a tremendous amount of personality to our game. Unfortunately, in today's world, everybody acts and reacts in a vanilla way. Everything is just strike 1 out to the side, strike 2 out to the side, strike 3 a simple bow and arrow move. And I think some of that has come about because of the electronics in the game today. If somebody is wrong, or incorrect in a judgment call, they are corrected, and they don't want to go through the histrionics of a big call and then be corrected later on. I don't think it adds anything to our game. I think that all the umpires today look like all the NFL officials, who look like all the NBA officials, and I think it takes some of the personality out of the game. I think I liked it better the way that it was when I was working and during my era. That's a great question, Dave.
Thank you. And thanks for the answer.
You're certainly welcome.
All right. George Case, anything you want to add?
I could talk and add, I could talk to Al forever. I just, we have a common baseball background, and this is so enjoyable for me, and I'm really happy. And Al had mentioned to me about sometime if he's up this way into Pennsylvania and he knows where it is. I'm about 10 minutes from where he used to live. So if he's ever coming up this way, I'd love to get together and have a cup of coffee and just talk baseball. So a lot of fun for me, Al. I really enjoyed it.
George, I'll tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to come up there and we're going to go to Di Lorenzo's and have a pizza.
Well, they're open now, so you could do that.
I know.
All right, guys. Ronnie Rabinovich, would you close us out?
Well, Al, I want to thank you for being on the show. You and I have been friends for quite a while, and the invitation is open always. If you ever get to Minneapolis, I want to take you to lunch and we'll have a good time.
I've enjoyed many steaks at Manny's in the old Hyatt there.
Oh, good.
Hey, Al, he's going to take me to dinner. How come you only get lunch?
I'll take you to dinner, too. I'll take you to dinner.
Be fair.
We'll go to Manny's.
All right.
Very good.
But it's not in the Hyatt anymore. But it's still around.
Okay.
All right.
Guys, thank you very much for having me. I look forward to the baseball season and look forward to being back with you guys again soon.
Always good talking to you, Al.
Take care, buddy.
Thank you, gentlemen. It was fun this morning.
Thanks, Ralph.
Yep. Bye-bye, everybody.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you soon, David. Adios, everybody.